The warm waters of the Gulf of Mexico lapped gently against the white fiberglass hull of the 38-foot cabin cruiser named Serenity as it drifted back into Tampa Bay Marina during the early hours of June 15, 2024. It was 3:17 a.m. when harbor security noticed something unusual about the vessel's approach. It was moving erratically, seemingly with no one at the helm. When security personnel boarded the boat, they found Blake Mercer, 42, alone and visibly distressed. His wife, Elaine Mercer, 37, was nowhere to be found. According to the initial report filed by Officer Raymond Jackson, Blake was disoriented, with bloodshot eyes and wet clothing. His first words to authorities were not a cry for help, but a strangely detached statement. "She's gone. She fell overboard." The timeline Blake provided raised immediate red flags. The couple had departed from Tampa Bay Marina at approximately 8:30 p.m. on June 14th, for what Blake described as a spontaneous evening cruise. Unusual, according to those who knew the couple, as Elaine reportedly disliked nighttime boating due to her poor night vision. No float plan had been filed, no destination indicated. Why had they chosen to venture out so late? And why had Blake waited nearly 7 hours before returning to report his wife missing? In cases like these, time is critical, explained Lieutenant Commander Nadine Ortiz of the U.S. Coast Guard during a press conference held later that morning. The first hour after someone goes overboard is the most crucial for survival and recovery. Mr. Mercer's delay in reporting the incident significantly compromised our search and rescue efforts. The Coast Guard immediately deployed 2 45-foot response boats, a helicopter, and coordinated with nearby vessels to establish a search pattern based on current and wind data. The search area expanded to cover over 1,200 square miles of ocean over the following 72 hours. Blake's account of the evening continued to evolve during subsequent interviews. Initially, he claimed Elaine had gone to the bow to look at the stars while he piloted the vessel. Later, he suggested she might have been feeling seasick and gone to the edge of the boat. In a third version, he mentioned they'd had a few drinks and he thought she might have lost her balance during a moment of turbulence. The inconsistencies were immediately concerning, noted Detective Sophia Reeves, a 14-year veteran of the Tampa Police Department's Major Crimes Unit, who was assigned to the case after the Coast Guard alerted local authorities to the suspicious circumstances. When someone is recounting a traumatic event, some details may be unclear, but the core narrative typically remains consistent. Mr. Mercer's story was changing in fundamental ways. What further complicated the case was the complete absence of evidence that Elaine had gone overboard at all. No life jacket was missing. None of her personal items appeared to have gone into the water with her. Her cell phone was found in the cabin, powered off, while her designer handbag remained untouched in the storage compartment below deck. The marina's security cameras captured the Mercers boarding the Serenity together at 8:22 p.m. Elaine was wearing white linen pants, a navy blue blouse, and carrying a small insulated bag that appeared to contain wine and snacks. Her body language, as analyzed by FBI behavioral specialists later in the investigation, showed no signs of distress or reluctance. She smiled at the dock attendant and even waved to another boater she recognized. "People noticed Elaine," said Marina manager Terrence Wilkins. "She had this way about her, confident, always put together, kind of a presence, you know? That night was no different, nothing seemed off." But as Detective Reeves began digging into the Mercers' background, a more complex picture emerged. The couple owned Mercer Financial Innovations, a boutique investment firm that had gained prominence in Tampa's affluent circles over the past 5 years. Their marketing materials promised exceptional returns through proprietary investment strategies, language that would later prove significant. 3 days into the search, with no sign of Elaine, forensic teams conducted a thorough examination of the Serenity. What they found immediately changed the trajectory of the investigation. A section of carpet in the main cabin had been recently cleaned, so recently that it was still slightly damp. Luminol testing revealed the presence of what appeared to be blood traces despite the cleaning efforts. Furthermore, the boat's GPS system had been cleared, with all navigation data from the night in question deleted. "That doesn't happen accidentally," explained marine forensic specialist Amara Jenkins. "Someone deliberately wiped the system. It takes multiple confirmations and a specific sequence of commands to erase that data." When confronted with these findings, Blake Mercer requested a lawyer and ceased cooperation with the investigation. By this point, The case had shifted from a potential accident to a suspected homicide. But without a body, prosecutors knew building a case would be challenging. On day 5, as the Coast Guard was scaling back its search efforts, a curious tip came in from a recreational diver named Marcus Zane, who had been exploring a popular reef about 28 miles offshore. Zane reported finding a woman's waterproof watch entangled in coral. The watch, a distinctive rose gold Breitling with custom diamond markers, was later identified as belonging to Elaine through photos from social media and family confirmation. Finding the watch was significant, Detective Reeves explained, but its location didn't align with the areas where Blake claimed the incident occurred. Either the ocean currents carried it an unlikely distance against prevailing flows, or Blake had been lying about where they were that night. As media attention intensified, an anonymous employee from Mercer Financial Innovations contacted authorities through a lawyer. The information they provided would prove to be the turning point in the case, but not in the way anyone expected. "We thought we were investigating a potential homicide," said FBI Special Agent Vance Cordero, who joined the case after the financial allegations emerged. "What we didn't realize was that we were actually looking at something much more elaborate." The whistleblower revealed that Mercer Financial Innovations was under scrutiny from the Securities and Exchange Commission for potential financial irregularities. Investors had recently begun questioning the consistency of their returns, and several had requested to withdraw substantial funds. A preliminary audit had been scheduled for the following month. When investigators obtained a warrant to search the Mercer's financial records, they discovered a labyrinth of offshore accounts, shell companies, and suspicious transfers. Over $3.7 million of investor funds had been moved through a complex network of accounts before disappearing entirely. The sophisticated nature of the scheme suggested professional expertise in financial systems and regulations, expertise that Elaine, with her background in international finance and prior work at a prominent Wall Street firm, possessed in abundance. "The timing became crucial to our understanding of what might have happened," Agent Cordero noted. "If Elaine had genuinely fallen overboard and drowned, it would have been a tragic coincidence, just before their financial house of cards was about to collapse. But in my experience, coincidences of this magnitude are exceedingly rare in criminal investigations." As investigators began to piece together the potential motives and opportunities, another twist emerged from an unexpected source. A review of Elaine's personal email accounts, obtained through legal channels, revealed exchanges with luxury real estate agents in countries known for their limited extradition agreements with the United States. The most recent communications had occurred just 2 weeks before her disappearance. Blake Mercer, now the central figure in what appeared to be both a financial fraud investigation and a missing persons case with suspicious circumstances, maintained his innocence regarding his wife's disappearance. However, he refused to address the mounting financial allegations, citing his Fifth Amendment rights. "At this point, we had to consider a scenario we hadn't initially contemplated," Detective Reeves admitted. "What if Elaine wasn't a victim at all? What if her disappearance wasn't an accident or a homicide, but something entirely different?" As the Coast Guard officially suspended its search after 7 days, declaring the mission had transitioned from rescue to recovery, investigators turned their attention to a third possibility, that Elaine Mercer had staged her own disappearance, possibly with or without her husband's knowledge or cooperation. This theory would lead them down a path of international intrigue, sophisticated deception, and a web of financial crimes that extended far beyond what anyone had initially suspected. The investigation was about to take a dramatic turn as authorities began examining the Serenity more closely, particularly the unusual modifications that had been made to the vessel in the weeks preceding Elaine's disappearance. The cabin cruiser, it seemed, held more secrets than anyone had imagined, secrets that would begin to unravel with the discovery of a hidden compartment containing specialized diving equipment and waterproof document cases. What had started as a tragic boating accident was evolving into something far more calculated and complex. As day turned to night on the 7th day of the investigation, Detective Reeves received a call from the FBI's Financial Crimes Division that would shed new light on who Elaine Mercer really was, and the elaborate scheme that may have been years in the making. As Detective Sophia Reeves studied the financial documents spread across the conference room table at Tampa Police Headquarters, a pattern was emerging, one that painted Elaine Mercer not as a victim, but as a mastermind. The morning sunlight streamed through the blinds, illuminating what appeared to be years of methodical financial deception. "These weren't impulsive decisions made under pressure," explained FBI financial analyst Wesley Harrington, pointing to a complex flowchart tracking millions of dollars through various offshore entities. This was a sophisticated long-term scheme that required extensive planning and expertise. Based on the transaction patterns we've uncovered, this has been in motion for at least 3 years. Mercer Financial Innovations had marketed itself as a boutique investment firm specializing in wealth preservation for high-net-worth individuals. Their claimed returns consistently outperformed market averages by 3 to 5% annually, impressive enough to attract wealthy clients, but not so extraordinary as to trigger immediate suspicion. The firm had accumulated 64 clients with a total of approximately $28 million under management. What those clients didn't know was that their investments weren't being placed in the carefully balanced portfolios described in the glossy quarterly reports they received. Instead, the money was being funneled through a series of shell companies in the Cayman Islands, Singapore, and Malta before disappearing into untraceable accounts. "It bears all the hallmarks of a Ponzi scheme with an exit strategy," noted SEC investigator Vanessa Ortega, who joined the investigation once the financial dimensions became clear. The Mercers were using new investor funds to pay returns to existing clients, while skimming millions off the top. But unlike most Ponzi operators who keep the scheme going until it collapses, they appear to have been planning a clean getaway. The investigation uncovered that approximately $3.7 million had been methodically siphoned off over the previous 3 years. The money moved through a complex network designed to obscure its ultimate destination. What made the scheme particularly sophisticated was how it anticipated regulatory scrutiny. "Most white-collar criminals leave obvious trails once you know what you're looking for," Agent Cordero explained. The Mercers, or more specifically Elaine, built in multiple layers of legitimate-appearing transactions that would withstand cursory examination. This wasn't amateur hour. As investigators dug deeper, Elaine's background provided crucial context. Before marrying Blake and establishing their firm in Tampa, she had spent 8 years at Lennox and Hartwell, a prominent Wall Street investment bank specializing in international client services. Her former colleagues described her as brilliant but intensely private. Several mentioned her encyclopedic knowledge of banking regulations and her particular interest in offshore financial systems. "She knew exactly where the blind spots were in the regulatory framework," said Ortega. "Her expertise wasn't in investment strategy. It was in knowing how to move money without raising red flags." Blake Mercer's background stood in stark contrast. A former yacht salesman with a business degree from a mid-tier state university, he had met Elaine when she purchased a luxury vessel through his dealership. Former colleagues described him as charismatic and an excellent salesman, but noted he lacked the financial sophistication his wife possessed. Blake was the face of the operation, Detective Reeves concluded after interviewing several clients. He handled client relationships, the social aspects, the country club meetings. Elaine managed the actual financial operations almost exclusively. Most clients rarely interacted with her directly. 3 weeks before her disappearance, Mercer Financial had begun facing increasing pressure from several significant clients. Howard Latimer, a retired pharmaceutical executive with 2 dogs, $3 million invested, had requested a complete withdrawal to fund his grandson's medical treatments. 2 other major clients had scheduled meetings to discuss concerns about market volatility, often a prelude to large withdrawals. The firm's banking records revealed a growing cash flow problem. Without new investments coming in at a sufficient rate, they were struggling to meet withdrawal requests while maintaining the facade of successful operations. They were approaching the breaking point that all Ponzi schemes eventually reach, Ortega explained. They couldn't meet obligations without raising suspicion. Based on our projections, they had perhaps 60 to 90 days before collapse was inevitable. The investigation took another significant turn when Trevor Palmer, Elaine's executive assistant for the past 2 years, was interviewed. Palmer described subtle but noticeable changes in Elaine's behavior in the weeks before her disappearance. She had always been meticulous about her schedule, keeping digital records of everything, Palmer recounted. But around late May, she switched to a paper planner that she kept with her at all times. She also began taking unusually long lunches, sometimes returning with shopping bags but nothing inside them. Palmer also noted that Elaine had instructed him to reschedule any client meetings for after July 15th, a full month after her eventual disappearance. When he questioned this directive, She explained it as a strategic realignment period for their investment portfolios. A search warrant executed on the Mercer's home office revealed a hidden floor safe behind a bookshelf. Inside, investigators discovered what appeared to be the missing piece of the puzzle, a Brazilian passport in the name of Natalia Veiga with Elaine's photograph, along with corresponding birth certificates and banking documents. The passport showed entry stamps from 3 visits to Brazil over the previous 18 months, trips that had not appeared on Elaine's legitimate travel records. The creation of an alternative identity is a significant indicator of premeditation, explained Agent Cordero. These weren't documents one could acquire quickly or easily. They required connections, significant funds, and time to establish convincingly. Perhaps most damning was the discovery of a rental agreement for a luxury apartment in Florianopolis, Brazil, a coastal city known for its beauty and relative privacy, under the Natalia Veiga identity. The 6-month lease had been signed 2 months before Elaine's disappearance, with rent paid in full in advance. As these financial details were being uncovered, forensic analysis of the couple's electronic devices yielded additional insights. While Elaine's primary phone had been found on the boat, a secondary phone registered to a corporate entity was discovered in her office drawer. This phone contained an encrypted messaging application with communications to an unknown contact identified only as Kingfisher. The messages, once decrypted, revealed detailed discussions about transition logistics and timeline adjustments. One message sent 3 days before the boating incident read, "Weather window favorable for Friday night. Proceed with Phase 2 as discussed." With mounting evidence of financial fraud, investigators obtained warrants for all of the Mercer's financial accounts. They discovered that Blake had made a series of unusual cash withdrawals totaling $125,000 in the weeks leading up to Elaine's disappearance. When questioned about these withdrawals, Blake claimed they were for boat upgrades and maintenance, yet no corresponding expenditures could be verified. "We believe Blake was accumulating a cash reserve," said Detective Reeves. Whether this was to facilitate his own escape to pay accomplices or for some other purpose remains unclear, but it clearly indicates advanced planning. The investigation also revealed that Elaine had taken out additional life insurance policies totaling $4.5 million approximately 14 months before her disappearance. All listed Blake as the sole beneficiary. The policies had unusually short contestability periods and covered accidental death, including drowning. The insurance angle introduces another potential dimension, noted Detective Reeves. If Blake could establish that Elaine had died accidentally, he stood to collect millions, funds that would be particularly useful if their financial scheme collapsed. This raised the possibility of dual motives. Was Elaine's disappearance part of an escape plan from the collapsing financial scheme, or was there something more sinister at play between the couple? The case took yet another turn when investigators interviewed the Mercer's neighbors. Lizette Vaughn, who lived across the street, reported overhearing an intense argument between the couple approximately 1 week before the incident. She was saying something about changing the plan and how they didn't have much time left, Vaughn recalled. Blake seemed agitated, kept saying "we agreed" over and over. "I remember because it was so unusual. They always presented themselves as the perfect couple." As the financial investigation expanded, authorities discovered connections to similar investment schemes in Seattle and Chicago, dating back 7 years, predating the establishment of Mercer Financial Innovations. In both previous instances, investors had lost millions to firms that suddenly closed, with the principals disappearing before charges could be filed. "We're looking at the possibility that this wasn't their first operation," Agent Cordero revealed. "The methodologies share striking similarities, though the names and specific structures differ. If confirmed, this would establish a pattern of behavior that spans nearly a decade." While Blake remained in custody on initial charges of obstruction of justice and financial fraud, the search for Elaine continued to evolve. Interpol issued a red notice, alerting law enforcement agencies worldwide to be on the lookout for her or her known aliases. The Kingfisher identity remained elusive, but metadata from the encrypted communications suggested the messages had been sent from locations in Panama and Costa Rica, countries known for their banking privacy and limited cooperation with U.S. financial investigations. As Detective Reeves organized the growing evidence board in the investigation room, a clear timeline was emerging, one that suggested Elaine's disappearance had been meticulously planned as their fraudulent financial empire began to crumble. But the most revealing discovery was yet to come. hidden in the depths of the seemingly ordinary cabin cruiser that had carried Elaine Mercer to her supposed watery fate. As marine forensic specialists continued their examination of the Serenity, they would uncover modifications that transformed the pleasure craft into something far more specialized, a vessel designed not for recreational boating, but for an elaborate disappearing act. The question now facing investigators wasn't whether Elaine Mercer had fallen overboard accidentally, but whether she had ever been on the boat at all during its final journey, and where in the world she might be now, potentially living under a new identity, with millions in stolen funds, while her husband faced mounting legal troubles alone. As the second week of the investigation came to a close, authorities prepared to examine every inch of the Serenity, believing the vessel itself might hold the key to unraveling the entire scheme. The Serenity sat in a secure warehouse at the Tampa Police Department's Marine Forensics Facility, its gleaming white hull contrasting with the industrial concrete floor. What had once appeared to be a standard luxury cabin cruiser was now the central focus of a multi-agency investigation that grew more complex by the day. On the surface, it looks like any other high-end pleasure craft you'd see in Tampa Bay, said marine forensic specialist Darren Ortiz, running his hand along the boat's exterior. But underneath the polished veneer, this vessel has been extensively modified for a very specific purpose. The 38-foot Meridian 381 sedan bridge had been purchased by the Mercers 3 years earlier for approximately $340,000. According to maintenance records, the boat had undergone what was documented as routine upgrades at 3 different marine service facilities over the past year. The fragmented service history initially seemed unremarkable until investigators realized it was a deliberate strategy to ensure no single technician saw all the modifications being made. It's actually quite clever, Ortiz explained. They'd have one facility install additional fuel tanks, another modify the navigation systems, and a third upgrade the electrical system. By compartmentalizing the work, they ensured no one could see the full picture of what they were creating. The most significant discovery came when forensic teams removed sections of the cabin's interior paneling, revealing a hidden compartment measuring approximately 6 feet long by 3 feet wide, large enough for an adult to hide in, though not comfortably for extended periods. This isn't something that comes standard on any recreational vessel, noted Coast Guard Lieutenant Commander Ortiz. It's a professionally constructed concealment space, similar to those we sometimes find on vessels used for smuggling, but with some key differences. The compartment contained a small independent oxygen supply system, thermal insulation, and what appeared to be a basic communication device. Most tellingly, there were indications someone had recently occupied the space: a water bottle, energy bar wrappers, and a small pillow. We believe this compartment served a critical role in whatever happened the night of June 14th, said Detective Reeves. It would have allowed someone to remain hidden during a Coast Guard inspection or during the initial search of the vessel after Blake Mercer returned to the marina. Further examination of the boat's GPS system yielded perhaps the most damning evidence yet. While the user-accessible navigation data had been wiped clean, forensic technicians were able to recover fragments from the system's backup memory. These fragments revealed that the Serenity had not taken the route Blake had described to investigators. Instead of the leisurely coastal cruise he claimed, the boat had traveled directly to a specific set of coordinates, approximately 27 nautical miles offshore, well into international waters. There, it had remained stationary for approximately 42 minutes before beginning its return journey to Tampa. That location is significant, explained FBI Special Agent Cordero, pointing to a nautical chart. It's beyond U.S. territorial waters, but still within relatively easy reach of the coast. More importantly, it's an area known among local captains for being a common transfer point for larger vessels headed to the Caribbean and South America. The GPS data also revealed something else. Contrary to Blake's statement that he had spent hours searching for his wife after she supposedly fell overboard, the boat had made a direct return to Tampa, following its stop at those coordinates, with no evidence of any search pattern or deviation in course. When confronted with this information during interrogation, Blake Mercer continued to insist that his wife had accidentally fallen overboard. However, he modified his story again, now claiming that he had panicked and couldn't remember exactly where the incident had occurred, which explained why he hadn't conducted an effective search. His story keeps evolving to accommodate new evidence, noted Detective Reeves. That's classic deceptive behavior. Truthful accounts remain consistent even when challenged. False narratives require constant adjustment. Another crucial discovery came when forensic teams analyzed the boat's recently modified fuel system. The standard 250-gallon capacity had been supplemented with an additional 180-gallon tank, nearly doubling the vessel's range. A typical recreational boater in these waters has no need for that kind of range, explained Ortiz. This modification would allow the boat to travel approximately 400 nautical miles without refueling, enough to reach parts of the Bahamas, Cuba, or even portions of Mexico's Yucatan Peninsula. The vessel's sophisticated autopilot system had also been upgraded with what marine specialists identified as commercial-grade components typically found on much larger vessels. This system would allow the boat to maintain a precise course with minimal human intervention, essentially enabling a single person to operate what would normally require at least 2 people to navigate safely on open waters. Every modification we've found supports the theory that this boat was being prepared for a very specific operation, Ortiz concluded. The extended range, the advanced navigation, the concealment space, these aren't features recreational boaters install for weekend cruising. Perhaps the most disturbing discovery came when luminol testing revealed trace blood evidence in multiple locations throughout the vessel, despite attempts to clean it thoroughly. Most significantly, a substantial blood residue was found in the concealed compartment, inconsistent with Blake's account of Elaine falling overboard. DNA analysis confirmed the blood belonged to Elaine Mercer. The pattern and distribution suggested an injury had occurred, though forensic pathologists could not determine its severity based solely on the residue found. The blood evidence directly contradicts Mr. Mercer's narrative, stated medical examiner Dr. Aisha Montgomery. While we can't establish with certainty what caused the bleeding, the location and pattern are inconsistent, with someone simply falling overboard. This occurred inside the vessel, specifically within the hidden compartment. When investigators returned to the coordinates where the Serenity had remained stationary for those critical 42 minutes, they deployed specialized underwater search equipment. Though they found no body, divers recovered a waterproof bag weighted down with diving weights. Inside were women's clothing, a wallet containing several of Elaine's credit cards and her wedding ring. This appears to be a deliberate attempt to dispose of items that could identify Elaine, Agent Cordero explained. The presence of her wedding ring is particularly telling. It suggests a symbolic severing of ties to her previous identity. Technical analysis of the vessel's radio revealed another significant clue. While the recent transmission history had been cleared, engineering specialists were able to recover fragments, indicating that multiple encrypted transmissions had been sent and received during the boat's journey, communications that were never reported to the Coast Guard or mentioned by Blake in any of his accounts. Standard marine VHF radios don't have encryption capabilities, noted communications specialist Adrian Wells. This unit had been modified with military-grade encryption modules, equipment that's highly restricted and not commercially available. Someone went to extraordinary lengths to ensure these communications couldn't be monitored. As investigators pieced together the evidence from the boat, they began forming a clearer theory of what might have happened on June 14th. Rather than a tragic accident, the evidence pointed to an elaborately staged disappearance, possibly with the knowledge and cooperation of both Elaine and Blake Mercer. The working hypothesis that emerged suggested that Elaine had never accidentally fallen overboard. Instead, she had likely been hiding in the concealed compartment as Blake piloted the vessel to the predetermined coordinates. There they had rendezvoused with another vessel, one capable of open ocean travel to international destinations beyond the immediate reach of U.S. authorities. We believe Elaine transferred to this second vessel with enough financial resources to establish herself elsewhere under a new identity, Detective Reeves explained at a case briefing. The question now is whether Blake was supposed to join her later, or if he was always intended to remain behind, possibly to collect on the insurance policies and maintain a facade that might delay a full investigation. The investigation took yet another turn when marine traffic records revealed that a 120-foot private yacht named Kingfisher's Bounty had been in the vicinity of the coordinates at the exact time the Serenity had been stationary there. The yacht, registered in Panama to a shell company, had departed from a private dock in Naples, Florida, the previous day, and had subsequently traveled south toward the Caribbean. The name Kingfisher immediately caught our attention, given the pseudonym used in the encrypted communications we recovered, Agent Cordero noted. We're working with international authorities to track this vessel, though it's likely changed identification by now. Satellite imagery obtained from the night in question showed a thermal signature consistent with a vessel the size of Kingfisher's Bounty at those coordinates, though the resolution was insufficient to identify specific individuals or activities occurring between the vessels. A week after these discoveries, another breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Vanessa Reed, captain of a sport fishing charter that had been operating in the area on the night of June 14th, came forward after seeing news reports about the case. "I didn't think much of it at the time," Reed told investigators. "It was dark, and we were heading back to harbor after a late charter. But we passed a cabin cruiser meeting up with a much larger vessel about 25-30 miles out. What caught my attention was that neither boat had proper running lights displayed, unusual for experienced boaters at night." Reed's testimony provided independent confirmation of the rendezvous theory, significantly strengthening the case against Blake Mercer and expanding the search for Elaine beyond U.S. borders. As the investigation of the Serenity neared completion, one final, crucial piece of evidence emerged. Hidden within the vessel's air conditioning system, a location that would typically never be examined during routine maintenance, technicians discovered a waterproof case containing detailed contingency plans, offshore banking information, and a satellite phone programmed with just one number. When forensic technicians powered up the phone, they found a single text message in its outbox, apparently never sent. Phase 2 complete. Complications with primary. Proceeding to alternate location per contingency. Will contact when secure. This message suggests something didn't go according to plan that night, Detective Reeves observed. The reference to complications with primary could indicate a problem with Blake, or possibly with their original escape route. The contingency plans included detailed instructions for reaching various locations in Central and South America, along with contact information for individuals specializing in creating new identities. Most significantly, they contained account numbers for several offshore banks with handwritten notes, indicating balances totaling over $5 million. As investigators continued to unravel the sophisticated plan that had been set in motion that night on Tampa Bay, the focus shifted to the digital trail that might reveal where Elaine Mercer had gone and whether she was still alive, living under a new identity with millions in stolen funds while her husband faced the consequences of their joint crimes. The Serenity, initially dismissed as merely the scene of a tragic accident, had proven to be the linchpin in understanding the elaborate scheme. Every modification, every hidden compartment, every sophisticated system pointed to months of meticulous planning that extended far beyond the boat itself and into a digital web of false identities, encrypted communications, and financial maneuvers designed to make Elaine Mercer disappear not into the waters of the Gulf of Mexico, but into a carefully constructed new life beyond the reach of American justice. In a windowless room at the FBI's Tampa field office, digital forensic analyst Maya Rodriguez sat surrounded by multiple monitors displaying fragments of Elaine Mercer's digital life. What had begun as a straightforward examination of a missing person's online footprint had evolved into a complex puzzle spanning multiple devices, accounts, and identities. Most people don't realize how persistent digital information really is, Rodriguez explained, scrolling through recovered data. Even when you think you've deleted something, traces remain in system backups, cloud syncs, and server logs. Elaine was sophisticated, but nobody disappears completely in the digital age. The investigation had recovered 7 devices belonging to Elaine: her primary laptop found at the Mercer residence, a secondary laptop discovered in a safety deposit box accessed just days before her disappearance, 2 smartphones, a tablet, and 2 external hard drives. Each had been systematically wiped using advanced deletion software, but the very thoroughness of this digital scrubbing became its own kind of evidence. The deletion patterns we're seeing aren't consistent with someone casually clearing their browsing history, noted Rodriguez. This is military-grade data destruction, implemented methodically across multiple devices. That alone tells us this was planned well in advance. Despite these efforts, investigators were able to recover fragments of critical information through a combination of cloud backups, server logs from the Mercer's investment firm, and forensic reconstruction of partially overwritten data. The picture that emerged revealed months of careful preparation, Beginning approximately 9 months before her disappearance, Elaine's search history showed a marked increase in queries related to countries without extradition treaties with the United States. Particular focus was given to Panama, Belize, and Montenegro, all nations with limited cooperation with U.S. authorities and relatively stable banking systems. She wasn't just researching vacation destinations, Agent Cordero noted. She was specifically looking at banking regulations, residence permit requirements, and property ownership rules for foreigners. This is the research profile of someone planning to relocate permanently, not someone planning a holiday. More tellingly, Elaine had conducted extensive research on privacy-focused technologies, encrypted communication platforms, anonymous cryptocurrency transactions, and methods for establishing digital identities disconnected from her real-world identity. Browser history fragments showed multiple visits to forums frequented by privacy advocates and those seeking to disappear from digital surveillance. Email records revealed another crucial lead. 6 months before her disappearance, Elaine had begun corresponding with a real estate agency in Placencia, Belize, a small coastal community known for its expatriate population and relaxed approach to foreign residents. The correspondence, conducted through an encrypted email service under the alias Natalia Vega, involved detailed discussions about waterfront properties and the legal requirements for foreigner property ownership. She was specifically looking for isolated properties with private dock access, Agent Cordero explained. The timing of these inquiries aligns perfectly with the early stages of what we now understand was an exit strategy from their collapsing investment scheme. Financial investigators tracking Elaine's digital banking activities discovered a pattern of cryptocurrency purchases beginning approximately 1 year before her disappearance. Using multiple exchanges and wallet addresses, she had systematically converted approximately $8 million into Bitcoin, Monero, and other cryptocurrencies known for their privacy features. This provided her with a financial escape route that wouldn't trigger traditional banking alerts, explained financial crime specialist Teresa Huang. Once converted to cryptocurrency, these funds could be transported across international borders without physical cash movements, and later converted back to fiat currency with minimal traceability. Perhaps the most significant digital discovery came from the recovery of deleted files on Elaine's secondary laptop. Technicians recovered a partial document containing what appeared to be a checklist for assuming a new identity, including items such as secure offshore accounts, establish credential background, and create consistent digital presence for NV, presumably the Natalia Vega identity found in the hidden passport. What's particularly interesting is how methodically she approached creating this alternate identity, Rodriguez noted. She wasn't just obtaining false documents, she was building an entire backstory, complete with social media accounts dating back several years and professional credentials that would withstand basic verification. Investigation of IP address logs revealed that someone had been accessing and maintaining the Natalia Vega social media accounts from various locations around Tampa for nearly 3 years, gradually building a believable online presence for this fictional person. The accounts depicted Natalia as a Brazilian-American investment consultant specializing in expatriate financial services, a cover identity that would explain both her knowledge of financial systems and her presence in expatriate communities. It was an elaborate digital forgery of a human life, Rodriguez explained. Photos that appeared to show this Natalia person in various locations were actually carefully edited images of Elaine, with subtle changes to hair color, style, and occasionally facial structure through skillful use of filters and editing software. When investigators examined the metadata of these images, they discovered they had been artificially backdated to create the impression of a long-existing online presence. Some had been posted through VPNs and anonymizing services to make them appear as if they had originated from locations around the world. The level of attention to detail is remarkable, noted FBI behavioral analyst Dr. Sarah Chen. This isn't impulsive or reactionary behavior. This identity creation shows long-term planning and a sophisticated understanding of digital forensics and how authorities track people online. Elaine was effectively creating a digital alibi for her new identity years before implementing her disappearance. The most direct evidence of Elaine's current whereabouts came from an unexpected source: cloud backup data from the specialized satellite phone found hidden on the Serenity Although the device had been configured to minimize data retention, automatic system backups had preserved fragments of GPS data from calls made in the days following her disappearance. These coordinates pointed to movement from the Gulf of Mexico toward the Yucatan Channel, the water passage between Mexico and Cuba, and subsequently into the Caribbean Sea, consistent with the theorized escape route to Central America. The satellite phone data puts the final piece into place, Agent Cordero explained. It confirms movement along the exact route we suspected, based on the vessel's modifications and the rendezvous coordinates. She was heading south, toward territories where both her Natalia Vega identity and her financial resources were already established. As digital forensics continued, investigators uncovered another critical piece of evidence within the fragmented data from Elaine's devices: communications with an individual who appeared to be the mysterious Kingfisher mentioned in earlier encrypted messages. While the identity of this person remained unknown, the nature of the communications suggested a professional relationship rather than a romantic one. The exchanges focused on logistics, financial arrangements, and contingency planning, with frequent references to extraction services and documentation preparation. Based on the language used, we believe Kingfisher is a professional facilitator who specializes in helping wealthy individuals disappear with their assets, explained Agent Cordero. These services exist in the shadows of the legitimate financial world, operators who, for the right price, can help clients evade legal consequences by providing new identities, secure transportation, and financial laundering services. Further digital evidence revealed that Elaine had made payments totaling approximately $650,000 to offshore accounts linked to the Kingfisher entity in the months leading up to her disappearance. These payments coincided with key milestones in her preparation, including the acquisition of the Natalia Vega identity documents and the purchase of property in Belize through a shell company. The financial trail suggests a comprehensive service package, noted Huang. For someone with Elaine's resources, this would be seen as a reasonable investment to protect the millions she had misappropriated from investors. As investigators pieced together the digital breadcrumbs, they uncovered a message exchange that provided critical insight into the relationship between Blake and Elaine Mercer in the final stages of their plan. In a series of encrypted communications recovered from backup servers, the couple had discussed contingency scenarios just 3 weeks before Elaine's disappearance. Elaine, secondary extraction may be compromised. SEC inquiry moving faster than anticipated. Blake, stick to the timeline. I can manage the delays here. Elaine, not if they freeze accounts. Need to accelerate primary extraction to next week. Blake, too risky. Preparations for my exit aren't complete. Elaine, your choice. Partial exit now or no exit later. Walls are closing in. This exchange suggests that Blake expected to join Elaine eventually, but circumstances forced them to move up the timeline, Detective Reeves noted. It appears Elaine prioritized her own escape when it became clear regulatory authorities were closing in faster than anticipated. The digital investigation also revealed something unexpected. Elaine had been monitoring law enforcement communications related to Mercer Financial Innovations for months before her disappearance. Through sophisticated spyware planted on the personal device of a clerical employee at the SEC who was involved in the preliminary inquiry into their firm, she had gained early warning of the regulatory investigation. This explains how they stayed one step ahead, Rodriguez said. She knew exactly when the formal investigation was about to launch and timed her disappearance accordingly. What she couldn't have anticipated was how quickly we would connect the financial fraud to her disappearance. As the 4th week of the investigation began, digital forensics yielded what appeared to be the final confirmation of Elaine Mercer's fate. Analysis of international banking records revealed that a property in Plasencia, Belize, purchased through a shell company 6 months earlier, had received a significant utility activation request just 2 days after Elaine's disappearance from Tampa Bay. The request, made in the name of Natalia Vega, included connection of high-speed internet service, electrical upgrades consistent with home security systems, and water service activation. Satellite imagery of the property showed a modest but luxurious beachfront villa with a private dock and a recently arrived vessel matching the description of the Kingfisher's Bounty yacht. We now have reasonable certainty regarding Elaine Mercer's current location, Agent Cordero announced at the investigation briefing. The digital evidence, combined with the physical evidence from the Serenity and the financial paper trail, presents a clear narrative. This was not a boating accident or a murder, but an elaborately staged disappearance designed to allow Elaine to escape with millions in stolen investor funds, as U.S. authorities coordinated with Belizean officials to verify Elaine's presence at the property. The digital investigation turned to one final question. Was Blake Mercer a willing accomplice left behind to maintain the deception, or had he been betrayed by his wife when their financial scheme began to unravel? The answer appeared to lie in one final recovered message, sent from Kingfisher to Elaine just hours before her disappearance. Primary extraction confirmed for tonight, secondary extraction compromised. Suggest proceeding with contingency protocol Omega. Asset B now liability. For investigators, the meaning was clear. Asset B referred to Blake Mercer. The secondary extraction was his planned escape, and contingency protocol Omega appeared to be a predetermined plan to abandon him to face the consequences alone. As digital forensic teams continued to extract and analyze data from the recovered devices, the focus of the investigation shifted toward the international effort to locate Elaine Mercer and return her to face justice. But this next phase would require navigating the complex waters of international law, extradition treaties, and the challenges of bringing to justice someone who had spent years planning her disappearance. The digital breadcrumbs had led investigators from a supposedly tragic boating accident to the threshold of an international manhunt. What remained to be seen was whether the same technology that had helped them track Elaine Mercer's elaborate escape would ultimately enable them to bring her back to face the consequences of her actions. As dawn broke over Tampa Bay on July 19, 2024, 5 weeks after Elaine Mercer's disappearance, the investigation took an unexpected turn with a phone call to the FBI's tip line. Vanessa Reed, a 42-year-old yacht captain with 15 years of experience navigating the Gulf waters, had finally returned from a lengthy chartered voyage to find her name mentioned in news reports about the case. "I remember that night clearly," Reed explained as she sat in an interview room at FBI headquarters, her weathered hands wrapped around a cup of coffee. "You don't forget something that unusual when you've spent as much time on these waters as I have." Reed had been returning from a late sport fishing charter on the evening of June 14th, when she observed something that initially seemed merely odd, but in retrospect proved critically important. A cabin cruiser, matching the description of the Serenity meeting, with a much larger vessel in open waters, both running without proper navigation lights. "It was approximately 10:45 p.m., Reed recalled. "We were about 28 miles offshore, heading back after a sunset marlin excursion. One of my clients spotted them first, 2 vessels with minimal lighting conducting what appeared to be some kind of exchange or transfer. At the time, I assumed it might be smugglers, which isn't unheard of in these waters, so I altered course to give them a wide berth." What made Reed's testimony particularly valuable was her detailed observation of the vessel's behavior and her maritime expertise. As an experienced captain, she had instinctively noted specific details that a casual observer might have missed. The smaller vessel, which I now believe was the Mercer's boat, was positioned alongside the larger yacht in a very specific way, she explained. "It's a technique we call standing off, where you maintain position relative to a larger vessel in open water without actually tying up to it. It requires skill and indicates professional-level seamanship. Whoever was piloting that cabin cruiser knew exactly what they were doing." More significantly, Reed had observed what appeared to be a transfer between the vessels, something being moved from the smaller boat to the larger one. "It was dark, and we kept our distance, but my first mate and I both saw what looked like a transfer of cargo, possibly a person or large package, from the cabin cruiser to the yacht. There was a brief flash of light, like someone momentarily using a flashlight, and then both vessels began to separate." Reed's testimony was corroborated by her first mate, Miguel Dominguez, and 2 of their clients who had been on deck at the time. Together, their statements provided the first eyewitness confirmation of the theorized rendezvous between the Serenity and what investigators now believed was the Kingfisher's bounty. What Captain Reed and her crew observed aligns perfectly with the GPS data recovered from the Serenity, noted Agent Cordero. "The location, timing, and activities described match our reconstruction of events based on the forensic evidence." The witnesses' observations addressed a crucial question that had puzzled investigators. How had Elaine, potentially injured based on the blood evidence found in the hidden compartment, managed the physical transfer between vessels in open water at night? Reed's testimony suggested an answer. The larger vessel had deployed what looked like a specialized boarding system, something similar to what we use for sea-to-platform transfers in the offshore industry. It's essentially a stabilized gangway that compensates for wave action between vessels. That's not standard equipment on pleasure craft. It suggests this yacht was specifically equipped for mid-sea transfers. This detail reinforced the theory that Kingfisher was a professional facilitator specializing in helping wealthy clients disappear. Such equipment represented a significant investment and specialization beyond typical luxury yacht features. Reed also provided another critical detail, a partial identification of the larger vessel. Though operating with minimal lighting, the yacht had briefly illuminated its stern during the separation maneuver, revealing part of a name. I could make out Fisher's B on the transom. At the time, it didn't seem significant, but when I heard reports about communications with someone called Kingfisher, I made the connection. Armed with this confirmation, investigators expanded their search for the Kingfisher's bounty through international maritime channels. Within days, they received confirmation that a vessel matching its description had made an unscheduled stop in Isla Mujeres, Mexico, for refueling on June 15th, the day after Elaine's disappearance. Port records indicated it had departed after just 4 hours, continuing south toward Belizean waters. While Reed's testimony provided crucial validation of the marine aspects of Elaine's escape, another unexpected witness emerged to shed light on the financial dimensions of the case. Trevor Palmer, Elaine's executive assistant, came forward with additional information after reviewing his personal records. I remembered something that seemed trivial at the time, Palmer explained to investigators. About 3 months before Mrs. Mercer disappeared, she asked me to investigate private banking options in Montenegro. She framed it as research for a potential client interested in European investments, but now I realize she was exploring options for herself. Palmer produced email correspondence and research documents he had compiled for Elaine, outlining Montenegro's banking secrecy laws, citizenship by investment program, and property ownership regulations. The materials painted a picture of a country that offered significant privacy protections for wealthy foreigners, a potential secondary escape destination if Belize proved unsuitable. She was particularly interested in the Porto Montenegro development, Palmer noted. It's a luxury marina and residential community, catering to the international yachting set, the perfect place for someone with a vessel like Kingfisher's Bounty to blend in among other wealthy expatriates. This information expanded the scope of the international search, suggesting Elaine might have been planning a 2-stage disappearance, an initial escape to Belize, followed by a subsequent relocation to Montenegro once the initial investigation subsided. As these witness accounts strengthened the case against both Mercers, Blake's legal situation deteriorated further. Held without bail on preliminary charges of obstruction of justice and financial fraud, he maintained that his wife had accidentally fallen overboard. However, faced with mounting evidence of his complicity in both the financial crimes and the staged disappearance, his attorney approached prosecutors about a potential cooperation agreement. Mr. Mercer is prepared to provide complete information regarding the investment scheme and his knowledge of Mrs. Mercer's current whereabouts, stated defense attorney Jonathan Weinstein during a closed-door meeting with the prosecution team. In exchange, he seeks consideration regarding the charges and eventual sentencing. What followed was a series of proffer sessions during which Blake, under a limited immunity agreement, revealed the full extent of the fraud and the elaborate escape plan. His account largely confirmed what investigators had already pieced together through forensic evidence, but added crucial personal context. It was Elaine's idea from the beginning, Blake claimed during these sessions. She had the financial expertise, the international connections. I was mostly the front man, the face clients trusted. The escape plan was always designed primarily for her. I was supposed to follow later after handling certain cleanup details. According to Blake, the original plan had called for him to maintain the appearance of a grieving husband searching for his missing wife for several weeks, collect on the insurance policies, liquidate remaining accessible assets, and then join Elaine in Belize approximately 2 months later. However, the speed with which investigators connected the disappearance to the financial fraud had derailed this timeline. She had contingency plans for everything. Blake admitted. When it became clear I wouldn't be able to join her as planned, she activated what she called Protocol Omega, essentially cutting me loose to face the consequences while she escaped with the bulk of the money. Blake's cooperation proved valuable in understanding the mechanics of their financial fraud, but offered limited actionable intelligence regarding Elaine's current situation. The most significant information he provided concerned the identity of Kingfisher, allegedly a former military contractor named Richard Kessler, who specialized in extraction services for wealthy clients seeking to disappear. Elaine met him through financial circles in the Cayman Islands about 4 years ago, Blake revealed. He doesn't come cheap. His basic package starts at $500,000, with additional services like the mid-sea transfer costing extra, but he guarantees results for clients who can afford his fees. While Blake's testimony added context to the investigation, his credibility remained questionable. Behavioral analysts noted that he appeared to be minimizing his own involvement while emphasizing Elaine's role as the mastermind, a common strategy for defendants seeking leniency. "We're treating Mr. Mercer's statements as valuable, but requiring verification," explained Detective Reeves. His account aligns with much of our evidence, but he has clear motivations to shift blame and present himself as a secondary participant. As investigators continued to build their case, another unexpected witness emerged, one whose testimony would provide the most compelling evidence yet of Elaine's current whereabouts. Maria Vasquez, a Belizean housekeeper employed at several luxury properties in Placencia, contacted authorities after recognizing Elaine's photograph in an international police bulletin. Vasquez had been hired to prepare a beachfront villa for a new occupant who called herself Natalia Vega. The woman in the photographs is the same person who arrived at the Orchid Bay property in mid-June, Vasquez confirmed via video conference. She has darker hair now and wears tinted glasses, but it is definitely the same woman. According to Vasquez, Natalia had arrived via private yacht, moving in with minimal personal belongings, but arranging for substantial furniture and household deliveries in the following days. She kept to herself, rarely interacting with neighbors or venturing into town, and had installed an extensive security system on the property. "She told me she valued her privacy because she was a writer working on an important book," Vasquez recalled, "but I noticed she spent most of her time on the computer, monitoring financial websites, not writing at all." Most significantly, Vasquez reported that as recently as 3 days earlier, Natalia was still in residence at the villa, though she had mentioned plans for an extended sailing trip to explore the Caribbean coast. This first-hand confirmation of Elaine's presence in Belize provided the basis for formal diplomatic communications between U.S. and Belizean authorities regarding potential detention and extradition. However, the process was complicated by jurisdictional issues and the limited nature of the extradition treaty between the two nations. Belize's extradition treaty with the United States covers a specific list of offenses, explained Justice Department International Affairs Specialist William Chen. Financial crimes can be particularly challenging to prosecute across borders, especially when they involve sophisticated structures that may not clearly violate local laws in the host country. While diplomatic negotiations continued, surveillance of the Placencia property was established through cooperation with local authorities. Satellite monitoring confirmed the presence of a woman matching Elaine's description, along with regular visits from the yacht previously identified as Kingfisher's Bounty, now sailing under a different name and Panamanian registry. The investigation received another boost when analysis of marine radio transmissions from the night of June 14th yielded partial recovery of the encrypted communications between the Serenity and the yacht. Though most of the content remained indecipherable, technical specialists were able to isolate vessel identification codes that conclusively linked the communications to the Kingfisher's Bounty. "The radio transmission data completes the chain of evidence," Agent Cordero explained. "We now have GPS data placing the Serenity at specific coordinates, eyewitness testimony confirming a rendezvous with a larger vessel, communication records between the two vessels, and confirmation that the larger vessel subsequently traveled to Belize, where Elaine Mercer is now living under her pre-established alternate identity." As July drew to a close, international coordination between U.S., dual Mexican and Belizean authorities intensified. Financial crime specialists worked to trace and freeze assets connected to the Mercer's fraud scheme, while diplomatic channels addressed the complex legal requirements for apprehending and extraditing Elaine. The net was tightening around Elaine Mercer, whose elaborate escape plan, years in the making and executed with meticulous attention to detail, was now unraveling due to the combined effects of forensic evidence, digital traces, financial tracking, and perhaps most crucially, the observations of witnesses who had unknowingly observed key moments in her disappearance. For investigators, the case had evolved from a presumed tragic accident to a complex international manhunt. What remained now was the final phase, bringing Elaine Mercer to justice and recovering whatever remained of the millions in investor funds she had taken with her into her carefully constructed new life. The morning of August 12, 2024, dawned clear and humid over the coastal community of Placencia, Belize. At precisely 6:30 a.m., a coordinated operation involving Belizean National Police, Interpol agents, and U.S. law enforcement liaisons converged on an elegant beachfront villa at the northern end of the peninsula. The property, a three-bedroom modernist structure with floor-to-ceiling windows facing the Caribbean, had been under surveillance for 11 days. "We approached with maximum discretion," recounted Inspector Manuel Ortega of the Belizean National Police. "The property had sophisticated security systems, and our intelligence suggested the subject might have escape contingencies in place. Our primary concern was preventing another disappearance. The operation had been timed to coincide with what surveillance had identified as a predictable pattern. Each morning at approximately 6:45 a.m., the woman identifying herself as Natalia Vega would emerge onto the rear deck of the villa for coffee and to swim in the private infinity pool overlooking the sea. This routine provided a window when she would be away from communication devices and potential weapons. As officers secured the perimeter of the property, disabling the electronic security systems with specialized equipment, the woman emerged right on schedule, carrying a porcelain mug and wearing a black swimsuit with a sheer cover-up. For a moment, she stood gazing out at the turquoise waters, seemingly oblivious to the closing net around her. "Ms. Mercer, we have a warrant for your arrest," announced Inspector Ortega, stepping onto the deck with two officers. "Please remain where you are." According to officers present, Elaine Mercer displayed no surprise or resistance. After a momentary pause, she placed her coffee mug carefully on a side table and said simply, "I've been expecting you. I'm surprised it took this long." The arrest was executed without incident. A thorough search of the property revealed multiple laptops, encrypted hard drives, and approximately $220,000 in cash in various currencies. Most significantly, investigators discovered a hidden safe containing the Brazilian passport for Natalia Vega, additional identity documents for 3 other aliases, and detailed contingency plans for relocating to Montenegro, Malaysia, and Madagascar, all countries with limited extradition agreements with the United States. The property was essentially a command center for maintaining her new identity while monitoring the investigation back home, explained FBI Special Agent Cordero, who arrived in Belize shortly after the arrest. She had established secure communications, multiple escape routes, and financial channels designed to sustain her indefinitely. Digital forensics conducted on site revealed that Elaine had been meticulously tracking the investigation into her disappearance through both public news sources and confidential channels, likely through contacts maintained within financial circles. She had compiled detailed dossiers on key investigators, including Detective Reeves and Agent Cordero, analyzing their previous cases and methodologies. "She was studying us as intensively as we were hunting her," noted Cordero. "It was essentially counterintelligence, the kind of operational awareness you'd expect from a trained agent, not an investment advisor." The arrest in Belize represented the culmination of an international investigation spanning 8 weeks, 4 countries, and multiple law enforcement agencies. The fraudulent investment scheme that had begun as a seemingly legitimate financial enterprise had ultimately unraveled due to a combination of forensic evidence, digital traces, international cooperation, and the observations of key witnesses who had unknowingly observed critical moments in Elaine's elaborately staged disappearance. During her initial processing in Belize, Elaine remained composed and largely uncooperative, declining to answer substantive questions without legal representation. However, in a brief recorded statement, she made a single cryptic comment that investigators found revealing. "The plan was perfect, the variables were not." Extradition proceedings began immediately. Though legal experts anticipated challenges, due to the complex nature of the case and the specific provisions of the US-Belize extradition treaty. Prosecutors focused on the most clearly applicable charges: wire fraud, securities fraud, and conspiracy to obstruct justice, all explicitly covered under the treaty provisions. International extradition is never simple, particularly in financial cases, explained Justice Department International Affairs Specialist William Chen. Different jurisdictions view financial crimes differently, and defense attorneys inevitably challenge the process at every stage. While the legal proceedings advanced in Belize, investigators in Tampa continued to unravel the full extent of the Mercer's scheme. Forensic accountants had now traced approximately $4.8 million to accounts directly controlled by Elaine, though an estimated $2.3 million remained unaccounted for. The missing funds were believed to be held in cryptocurrency wallets, the access keys for which were not found during the Belize property search. Blake Mercer, still in custody in Florida, continued to cooperate with authorities, though his credibility remained questionable. His defense strategy increasingly focused on portraying himself as a secondary participant, manipulated by his more financially sophisticated wife, a narrative that investigators treated with skepticism given the evidence of his active participation in both the fraud and the staged disappearance. The dynamics between the Mercers represent a fascinating psychological case study, observed FBI behavioral analyst Dr. Sarah Chen. Their relationship appears to have been based on mutual exploitation rather than genuine partnership. Blake provided the charismatic front that attracted investors, while Elaine engineered the financial structures that enabled the fraud. When the scheme began to collapse, that exploitative dynamic culminated in her decision to abandon him to face consequences alone. On September 3rd, after 3 weeks of legal proceedings, a Belizean court approved Elaine's extradition to the United States. Under heavy security, she was transported to Philip S.W. Goldson International Airport in Belize City and transferred to the custody of U.S. Marshals for the flight to Tampa. Upon her arrival in Florida, Elaine faced a 32-count federal indictment, including charges of wire fraud, securities fraud, conspiracy, money laundering, identity theft, and obstruction of justice. State prosecutors added additional charges related to the staging of her disappearance, including filing a false police report through Blake and misuse of maritime emergency resources. The combined charges carried potential sentences totaling over 70 years in federal prison. As the case moved toward trial, prosecutors faced the challenge of presenting the complex financial and forensic evidence in a way that juries could comprehend. The investigation had generated terabytes of digital evidence, thousands of financial transactions across multiple jurisdictions, and forensic analyses of everything from GPS data to blood residue patterns. This case exemplifies the modern challenge of prosecuting sophisticated white-collar crime, noted U.S. Attorney Vanessa Martinez at a press conference following Elaine's arraignment. The Mercers weren't simply embezzling funds from their clients. They were constructing elaborate financial architectures specifically designed to obscure the flow of money, creating digital smokescreens to confuse investigators, and ultimately orchestrating a disappearance meant to prevent accountability. In preparation for trial, prosecutors worked closely with the victims of the Mercers' fraud, 64 investors who had entrusted the couple with approximately $28 million in total. Many were wealthy retirees who had lost substantial portions of their life savings. Their personal stories would provide the emotional context for what might otherwise appear as abstract financial transactions. "They didn't just take our money," said Howard Latimer, the pharmaceutical executive who had attempted to withdraw $2.3 million for his grandson's medical treatments. "They took our trust, our security, our peace of mind. I've spent 40 years building that nest egg for my family's future, and they destroyed it with calculated indifference." As the case against Elaine Mercer solidified, Blake's legal situation evolved in parallel. Facing overwhelming evidence and seeking to avoid the maximum penalties, he entered into a formal plea agreement with federal prosecutors in early October. In exchange for his comprehensive testimony against Elaine and assistance in recovering additional assets, he pleaded guilty to reduced charges, carrying a minimum sentence of 15 years. During his plea hearing, Blake provided his most complete account yet of the scheme's evolution and his role within it. While he continued to portray Elaine as the primary architect, His testimony acknowledged his full awareness and participation from the outset. "It started small," Blake admitted in court, taking excessive management fees, then gradually diverting client funds to our personal accounts. As we got away with it, the amounts grew larger. Elaine handled the financial mechanics. I was responsible for maintaining client relationships and deflecting questions. We were a team, each playing our part." Blake's testimony revealed that the scheme had accelerated significantly in its final year, as they realized regulatory scrutiny was increasing and several large clients were becoming suspicious. What had begun as embezzlement transformed into an exit strategy that included not only the financial preparations, but the elaborate staging of Elaine's disappearance. The boat modifications, the rendezvous at sea, the fake drowning scenario, all of it was meticulously planned over months, Blake testified. "We discussed multiple approaches and ultimately settled on the drowning narrative because it would be difficult to disprove without a body. The hidden compartment on the Serenity was installed specifically to allow Elaine to hide if the boat was stopped and searched during our journey to the rendezvous coordinates." When questioned about the blood evidence found in the hidden compartment, Blake revealed a disturbing detail. Elaine had stored her own blood over several weeks, drawing small amounts and preserving it. The plan was to distribute it to support the accident narrative, but during the actual event, the container broke inside the compartment, creating the larger stain that investigators found. It was one of several things that didn't go according to plan that night. The trial of Elaine Mercer began on November 12, 2024, in the federal courthouse in Tampa. Over 6 weeks, prosecutors presented a methodical case that chronicled the evolution of the fraud, the elaborate preparations for Elaine's disappearance, and the international manhunt that ultimately led to her capture in Belize. Key testimony came from Captain Vanessa Reed, whose chance observation of the vessel rendezvous had provided critical confirmation of the escape theory. Forensic specialists who had analyzed the modified Serenity, financial experts who traced the movement of investor funds, and ultimately Blake Mercer, whose insider account provided the jury with a window into the couple's motivations and methods. Throughout the trial, Elaine remained composed, displaying the same analytical detachment that had characterized her approach to the financial crimes and her elaborately planned escape. She declined to testify in her own defense, and her attorneys focused primarily on challenging the admissibility of evidence gathered in Belize and questioning Blake's credibility as a cooperating co-conspirator. On December 23rd, after 3 days of deliberation, the jury returned with unanimous guilty verdicts on all 32 federal counts. The judge scheduled sentencing for January 15, 2025, and remanded Elaine to custody pending that hearing. At the sentencing, several victims provided impact statements describing the devastating effects of the Mercers' fraud on their lives and futures. Prosecutors emphasized the calculated nature of the crimes, the extensive planning involved in the attempted escape from justice, and the total absence of remorse displayed by Elaine throughout the proceedings. When finally given the opportunity to address the court before sentencing, Elaine spoke briefly. "I recognize the court has reached its determination based on the evidence presented. I accept that reality. I would only note that in different circumstances, with different resources and connections, many financial practices that have been characterized as criminal in my case would be celebrated as innovative in other contexts. The line between creative finance and fraud is often determined by who draws it and why." The judge, unmoved by this perspective, sentenced Elaine Mercer to 22 years in federal prison without the possibility of parole for the first 15 years. Additionally, she was ordered to pay $28.4 million in restitution to the victims of the fraud, an amount that far exceeded the assets recovered to date. 2 weeks later, at his separate sentencing hearing, Blake Mercer received 18 years in federal prison with the possibility of parole after 12 years, reflecting his cooperation with authorities. Like Elaine, he was named in the restitution order, making both jointly responsible for repaying their victims. In the aftermath of the case, authorities continued efforts to recover additional assets, while approximately $3.2 million had been secured from accounts in Belize, Panama, and Singapore. Significant funds remained unaccounted for, likely secured in cryptocurrency wallets or other digital assets designed to remain beyond the reach of conventional financial tracking. The Kingfisher's bounty yacht was eventually located in a private marina near Cartagena, Colombia, operating under a new name and registry. Its owner, identified as Richard Kessler, the Kingfisher from Elaine's communications, remained at large, though Interpol issued a red notice for his arrest on charges of conspiracy and aiding a fugitive. For the investigators who had worked the case from its beginnings as an apparent boating accident, the successful prosecution represented the culmination of modern investigative techniques applied to an increasingly common form of crime, the sophisticated financial fraud coupled with elaborate efforts to escape justice. What made this case unique wasn't the financial fraud itself. "We've seen similar schemes before," reflected Detective Sophia Reeves at the conclusion of the trial. What distinguished it was the extraordinary lengths to which Elaine Mercer went to disappear completely, the years of planning, the creation of alternate identities, the international escape infrastructure. It represents a new challenge for law enforcement in an era where digital technology can facilitate both financial crimes and the attempt to escape accountability for them. The case of Elaine Mercer, the woman who orchestrated her own disappearance at sea only to be found living under a new identity in Belize, ultimately became a cautionary tale in financial circles and a case study in law enforcement training. It demonstrated that even the most meticulously planned deceptions could be unraveled through a combination of forensic science, digital investigation, international cooperation, and the unexpected observations of witnesses who happened to be in the right place at the right time. As one prosecutor noted in closing arguments, the perfect crime exists only in fiction. In reality, the very complexity required for such elaborate schemes creates multiple points of vulnerability. Ms. Mercer thought she had planned for every contingency, controlled every variable. But as with all human endeavors, perfection remained elusive, and justice, though delayed, was ultimately served.